So I think we need to start now because the timer is already ready. Hi, all, thanks being here. It's an incredible audience that we're having now. It's 4 p.m., but at least you're going to hear incredible people talking about the growth of education and talent in Latin America. So the actual name of this panel is the South American Dream, but we've made a correction because it's actually the Latin American Dream because Luis is from Mexico. So like I mentioned before, in this panel we're going to talk further about what is the education ecosystem in LATAM, what is the learner in LATAM looking when they go into online or offline education, and at the end we're going to talk a bit about what is the how tech and innovation is helping to succeed in LATAM for education entrepreneurs and companies that work in this industry. So I want to briefly introduce myself. I'm Olcese, CEO of Crehana. We are an online education company based in Lima, Peru, and we target customers in all around LATAM, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Peru are our main targets. I want to, if you can, please briefly introduce yourselves so that the audience knows who they are hearing about.
Should I begin? So my name is Rodrigo. I'm co-founder and CEO of Passei Direto. Today we're the largest study platform in Brazil, focused on the college market, 12 million users, 20 million visits per month, #1 app in iOS education, #2 in Android, and that's a brief introduction.
Cool. Mariana,
Very
please.
cool. My name is Mariana. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Laboratoria. We are a social enterprise preparing young women from underserved backgrounds to become front-end developers, and we then go out and place them in tech companies where they get to begin a career that can significantly change their lives for the better, and that can also start changing the tech sector in the region and turning it into an example of diversity and inclusion. And we have training centers in Peru, that's where we started, and we also have operations in Santiago, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and soon Sao Paulo.
Very good. Hi, I'm Luis. I'm the academic vice president of Universidad TECMILENI in Mexico. We have 29 campuses. We have 10,000 students online and 56,000 students countrywide. And we are offering majors in different areas, including IT and business engineering. And we have been recognized as the first positive university in the world.
Awesome. So we have different people from different industries here in the panel, and I just want to briefly start mentioning about some stats in Latin America. So you know there's 20 countries in LATAM. There's more than 600 million people there, and a third of that market is in Brazil. You must know that, Rodrigo. 66% of the youth in Latin America don't have a college or university degree, which is a huge problem to solve. And 70% of the companies in LATAM don't have an employee training program. So there's a huge opportunity there in which we can help out to increase the employability and the training of the market itself. So I want to start the panel first talking about what is the education ecosystem in LATAM. And I want you guys to highlight the differences in your segments, in your countries or markets about the US education market and the LATAM education market. And I think, Rodrigo, you can start.
Okay, so I think like focusing on the college market in Brazil, we have around 8 million students. And one of the big difference, maybe the main difference, is that colleges are private, yes, but they're private for profit.
Okay.
So I mean, we're creating huge businesses there. There's a group that has over 1 million students out of the 8 million, and another that's getting close to 1 million. So we see these huge groups, and I think that is really the main difference. And in terms of the ecosystem, like if you take a look, probably the biggest ed tech companies in the world are in the US and in China, and we still don't see many of those players still going to Brazil. So we have lots of players in Brazil that are getting scale, good market shares, and that is basically the scenario in Brazil. We have some groups that are going to Brazil, American groups on the university side, but not like really on the ed tech startup side.
Okay, and what can you say about the distribution of higher ed, K-12 workforce training in Brazil? What do you see there?
So I mean, starting in K-12, the government basically have a standardized curriculum for all schools, so that gives schools less flexibility, you know, to really teach different stuff, and I think that is a problem. Like many countries in LATAM, we have huge dropouts, you know, from year to year. And once these students get to college, what I see is that they're focused on, they have a dream to go to college, but many of them, unfortunately, aren't ready to go to college.
Okay.
So they go to college, they struggle a lot, especially with the academic side. Over 2/3 of the college students in Brazil, they work and study at the same time. Not internships, most are full-time jobs, you know. And yeah, basically it's less specialized courses. There's less majors and minors, really more generalized courses. And these guys are going to college with a hope of getting a salary increase. And that is basically what we see in Brazil.
Okay, awesome, thanks. And Mariana, talking about Peru. Now you have to notice that in this panel there are 2 Peruvian entrepreneurs, so that Peru is doing something about entrepreneurship. Yes, it's a good thing. So what about Peru? What do you see in Peru? I know the ecosystem is of education and tech innovation there is just beginning, but maybe you can talk a bit about the relationship between non-profit, profit companies there.
Yeah, so in Peru, I think there's so much opportunity in the space of higher education. It's a pretty big market, and over the past few years, we've seen very, very big increases in access to higher education. A bigger percentage of youth are now able to enroll. I think in Peru, it's nearly 40% of youth that are able to start a higher education degree. But I think there's 2 very important problems that we need to solve. The first one is the very, very large dropout rates in college. So out of those that join, only a minority ends up really finishing the degree. So you end up with a lot of people that have 1 year of college here, 2 years of college there, and that invested in that education, and it ends up being, I mean, in practical terms, useless in terms of getting a better job. And the other problem I see is the pertinence of that higher education, the quality of that higher education. Peru is a country where, given the limitations of the public education system, it's really open to private education providers at every level, K-12 and then even more at higher university levels. But you have a huge mix, and people tend to think that private is better, and often that's not necessarily the case. The very good universities are private, and they're really expensive. So they're very good quality, but they're only accessible to youth from households that have a middle or higher income. On the other hand, you have a very big offer of private universities that are of very poor quality. They're not expensive. They target populations from like the middle and lower socioeconomic segments. They, I think, play around the desire that youth have of having a degree, you know, and a degree is seen as something that will enable you to prosper. And in the end, I really think that we're doing a terrible job in actually serving those youth better. So I see a huge opportunity to come up with new models, new alternatives. On our experience, one of the things that we see is that really 4 or 5 years, it's a very long time, and in particular for families from lower income households, it's very difficult to commit to a program that's so long. So how can we build approaches to education that are a bit shorter, more job-oriented, more effective, that work closely with those hiring companies to prepare all youth really to have a better chance at a professional life.
And something that I know that you do in Laboratoria is that you work with the private sector. So you send your students to possible job offers and work with your partners. So what do you think and the dynamic of that private sector helping education in Peru? So what do you see there is what type of companies are actually being more involved inside your type of offer, for example?
So in our case, since we started, we were really focused in serving a real market need in a particular niche of technical talent, no, for software development. And we've been really active about engaging companies from the beginning to make sure that we can design our program based on their needs, and that they become part of the movement that we're trying to create. No? We always say we cannot do it alone. We're trying to give a better opportunity to women from underserved backgrounds. We need the companies to be there too and take a bet and say, I'm gonna try and source talent from somewhere that's not the typical really good university, because I know that there's talent, there's good talent elsewhere, and it can be part of building a more diverse and inclusive sector. And we've actually had great reception from companies. One of the things that we don't do is we don't give a degree, a formal higher education degree, and it really hasn't been a problem in terms of companies not being able to hire because our students don't have a formal degree. I see that they're becoming more and more open to it.
Great, thanks, Mariana. Coming to Luis,
Yes.
he's going to talk more about universities now. So what is your approach in TECMILENI? Maybe it could be good if you can briefly talk about your relationship with students, with governments, with private companies. What are you doing in TECMILENI now?
Yes. Well, what we are in TECMILENI, we are a non-for-profit university. We are tuition-driven, and we serve a number of students that we think is a group of students that is needing and is asking for quality education. The problem I see is in most of the universities I know, we are copying or inheriting models from other countries, and we are not developing a Latin model that we need for us. I think there is a market for very good quality education, very good quality education, very good quality universities. In Mexico, we have some of them. We have TEC de Monterrey, one of the best universities in Latin America, and there's a market for them. But I think the majority of the market is in need of what you have been saying, like people needing to work after the university, people which is willing to learn more on a practical way, where companies value that knowledge. And what we are focusing is basically in trying to give the student the opportunity to be employed at the time they graduate. So what we have changed some way the rules of the game, and we are offering a very flexible university where students decide what they want to study, but we do not offer majors that doesn't meet two requirements. The first requirement is that there is a number of students which is willing to enter the major, which is the easy way to do it, is the easy way to offer majors, right? So you have a market, you live of the tuition the students pay, so you offer what they want to receive. But the second part of the equation is that we do not offer any major that is not, that doesn't has a high employability rate. So if the place, for example, we have a campus, the most famous campus for us is Cancun, right? So if you want to visit us, you know that we have a campus in Cancun.
Cancun is a nice place.
Okay, so we have a campus in Cancun, for example, and then we do not offer any major in Cancun campus that we are not going to be able to guarantee the students that they are going to be able to find a job on the field they study. So we don't want any mobility from city to city, but we want the student to stay in the area, in the community they are learning, and they are going to be able to improve the community situation. For this, we have done a lot of things that we will be talking later maybe, but one of the best things I think we have done is to establish a local employability council in each campus. So whenever we are trying to offer a major, whenever we are trying to offer a minor or a certificate or a continuous education program, we ask these 10 or 12 leaders of the companies from that community to help us define if there is going to be a market. So we ask for amount, we call it quantity of enrollment and quality of employment as the two major indicators for this. Part of what is needed, I think, in Latin America is for us to understand that we serve a different market than the US, and we serve a different kind of student with different aspirations of the student. There always will be a top 3 or 5 quality universities, high quality universities that are very aspirational, where students want to go because they want to obtain the access to a master's degree or a doctorate degree in other countries. But the majority of the students are looking to be employed. And that's the way we define quality in education. When they talk, we talk about quality in education. Our philosophy in TECMILENI is how good is for you to receive classes from Nobel Prizes or PhD in a quantity of topics if those classes are not going to help you obtain a good job when you finish. So we're trying to redefine the rules of education on that part.
Great. So I want to go into detail something that you all three have mentioned about the learner. So the LATAM learner. What is the LATAM learner? And what are the key differences between a LATAM learner, between a US learner, or maybe a European learner, etc. I know each of your companies are different from each other and you have different types of learner inside, so I think that's going to be a great dynamic for this section. Maybe, Rodrigo, you can start talking a bit about who is your learner, what are they looking for, what are they using, how much are they investing, etc.
Got it. So there's an example of an education startup from the US that was going to launch in Brazil. And I think that this example makes it really clear how, especially the American learner is different than the LATAM and Brazilian learner. So basically, they were going to launch 10 courses. And I remember 2 courses really well. One was the origin of the universe, okay, and the other was the history of accounting. And basically, I get back to them and I say, guys, people here in this country are starving. They're without jobs. I mean, who in Brazil is going to study and pay for a course which is the origin of the universe or the history of accounting? So the learners need to get stuff that will make their lives go better, get a better job. So it's really focused on professional stuff, these more theory stuff, more aspirational. People are not really investing their time and money on that, definitely. That's not their number 1 priority.
Okay, and talking more about Passei Direto, I know that you're in a totally different industry from the workforce, and you're more into a academic company, making the transition between school and college.
Yes.
So exactly what can you say that you've identified in your platform that your target customer is actually valuing from you?
Got it. So I think it's the volume of the study materials and also how fast he can get to them, Because many students study in colleges which don't provide them enough study materials. And in Brazil, there isn't such a strong habit of after-class tutoring. People are not really used to investing this money. So they go to the internet and they need to find stuff that will help them understand something that's going to go in their exam, which they don't. And going back to that point that I said before, many of these guys are going to college and they're not prepared to. So actually what they're studying is more complex than their current knowledge helps them, assess. So it's really time efficient and getting the study materials and really focus on passing the exams. That is what the Brazilian college students are looking for. Like I said, these guys work and study, so they don't have much time, and they're probably not, most of them don't have, the knowledge necessary still to get the college level education.
Okay, great. Mariana, what is the stereotype of a Laboratoria student?
Yeah, so our students I think they're pretty awesome. They're really, really great because I think it's a mix of both things. We look for women with a lot of potential, with a lot of resilience, grit, that have, actually our students they're not so young, they're under mid-20s, so they've had a few batches on life, and I think they're in a point in their lives where they're very clear that it's up to them to actually do something about it, and that this is their opportunity to change their future and to go into a new field that's challenging for them for sure, that's new, that's risky in many ways, but they're pretty clear that they want to be there. But then I think we've also taken the approach of shaping the type of learner that we want in our classroom and in our program, We've worked a lot in defining what's the culture that we want from Laboratoria students, and how do we work very hard to make sure that they live up to these values. So things like making them love what they do and what they learn, and just really become passionate about the learning process itself. That's one of the core things that often doesn't happen in traditional education, where it really goes to the teacher. If you have a great teacher that motivates you, you were lucky, but it's not the common case. So we really try to make sure that we have students that are motivated, that are committed to learning, that are also accountable for their own learning. And this is something that it's always funny, because at the beginning they're like, okay, but where's the teacher? How is this working? Why aren't they spending more time with me? And we're always like, because it's not how it's gonna be when you're out in the world, so you better get used to it now. And we push them a lot so that they become responsible for their own learning process. And we say, if you don't wanna be here, that's the door, and you can go. Nobody's gonna force you. And we do all sorts of things, you know. It's a big group of women together, facing the same challenges and like walking together towards the same goal. So you do get this feeling of, I don't know, like just they have a big goals and they're gonna work so hard to get them.
Okay. I wanna, so the audience knows more about the socioeconomics of your students. Like, what have you seen on average, like maybe internet penetration or mobile devices with them? Like, what is their experience online? So when they go to Laboratoria, they're like, okay, I already have some experience online, or they initiate with you?
No, they do. We're in very big cities in Latin America, so they have a lot of access to technology. Internet penetration in our cities it's everywhere. So a large number of them have internet even at home or somewhere near their house. Many of them have smartphones, but obviously none of them have been on that other side of actually creating technology and building technology, no? But a few things that I think it's important to mention. I do think that life in these mega cities that we have in our region can be really difficult. Starting by transportation. We have poor public transportation systems. Our students on average commute 4 hours a day, 2 hours in, 2 hours out. And they commute not in like a nice train where they're able to read and practice, no. They have to take 4 different types of all sorts of random buses to get there. It's hard for them to take their computers back home because it's risky. It's hard to get your phone out because it's risky. If you combine that with all the responsibilities that they have at home, with all the complexities that are part of being a 25-year-old woman in maybe not the best neighborhood in one of our cities, I think that it takes a lot of eagerness and commitment to overcome, and they need to be really clear about why they're doing this and what they're going to attain afterwards. No?
Awesome. I think you've touched the point that we were going to talk later about mobile learning and how technology enables education throughout maybe those 4 hours of commute that a Laboratoria student has on a daily basis. And Luis, talking more about the student in TECMILENI, what are the basic needs of the students that you see in your university?
I think the students in TECMILENI, what they are eager to learn is practical things, practical stuff. So as I mentioned, our students are looking for a good job when they finish. We have a 40% nationwide, 40% of our students are the first generation students in their family. So what they need to do is to be able to become economically active as soon as they can. So our students appreciate our teachers because our teachers, we don't have any full-time faculty in the university. We do hire every semester 4,500 teachers from industry, people who has a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, but who has relevant job experience. So students immediately note when the teacher comes from that background and when a teacher doesn't have that background. And they let us know by social networks. How do we call it? We call it social listening, is the word? Okay. So whenever we have teachers, the more appreciated teachers are teachers that share the experience they have. And that's the major need for our students. The students need to have role models. They need to be able to see themselves in the future as the person which is in front of the group. So we try to bring to the classroom teachers that have this relevant job experience, plus they are a good example to our young people in the classroom. We also offer 40% of our classes are designed to be for adult education. So people who left the school in a moment because they needed to leave it out of their lives, and they are coming back. And what they want to do is to improve their quality of life, their economical possibilities. So when the student doesn't see that the course they are taking, when the student is not able to check on the relation between what I'm seeing in class to what I need in my job, then they will let us know. So we have to be all the time listening to the student and being able to bring examples of real life to the classroom. I think that's it.
So we've talked about the education ecosystem in LATAM. We moved into what is the LATAM learner, and Luis, you've mentioned something that is really important. What is the role of a teacher? And I think it's really cool that each of you guys have different types of relationship with students and different types of relationship with teachers. So I want to talk a bit about that before we move on. Maybe Rodrigo, Mariana, it's an open question. What is your typical teacher like? What are they doing? What is their background? How are they helping you, etc.?
Yeah, this one I prefer not to answer because we're a student direct platform, so
Okay.
we don't have basically no relationship with teachers.
No teachers, huh?
No teachers.
Yeah, I think teachers in Latin America, they're such an important part of society, and unfortunately, they don't always get that recognition. So in our case, teachers are, actually many of our teachers are our graduates. That's a model that we started implementing because they know the material world. They're very relatable to our students, so they really see themselves in them, as you were saying, Luis. And it's a way of helping us scale and grow. And honestly, it's also really hard to find good teachers out there. If there's a shortage of software developers, finding software developers that want to be teachers,
It's hard.
it's almost impossible.
Yeah, I know,
would say.
I know.
And I think this is something that all companies working in this space face. I was listening to a panel before, and a woman was talking about how this is a huge problem in the U.S. You know, there's more demand for computer science majors, but where do you get the teachers to teach computer science? So I think we need to do a lot of work around pushing up the prestige of what it means to be a teacher. And there's a lot of research about how in other countries it does work like that. It's a profession that's admired, really respected, and they have a lot of the burden of really improving our education system, no? So in our case, we try to give our teachers as much space as we can to grow, as much resources as we can to make sure that they continue keeping up to pace. But it's a big challenge. We'll have to see how it goes, because we also then have the problem that if you're teaching software, if you want to grow, you also need to be coding somehow. So our teachers usually teach some part-time and then also code in our own software the other half of the time.
Yeah. So the teacher side, I think it's really important to mention, because obviously there's a lack of talent in Latin America, and when we talk about the trends of the skills that people and companies need in LATAM, obviously you need to have the teacher side. So getting good teachers or moving a professional that is working maybe in development or design or UX or any other category and sell them the idea to become a teacher in the platform. That's something that we've been struggling since we've launched. In my case, Luis, in your case, I know that relationship between teachers is totally different from ours, maybe because it's an offline experience. But tell me a bit more about what you see in TECMILENI from the teacher side.
Yeah, we do two requirements to the teachers when we are recruiting teachers. Again, we recruit almost every semester. We have a turnover of about 20%. So what we do is, when we are recruiting teachers, we have to close the door so they don't run out. The first responsibility for a teacher in TECMILENI is to develop the competencies that the course is required to develop. So we don't care about the grade. we require for the teacher to develop the competence. So the student has to be able to do something, right? At the end of each course. At the end of each course, we have to be able to do what they are supposed to do in the context they are supposed to do. I mean, that's academic more than any other sport, but they have to be able to demonstrate the students. Actually, our student doesn't present a final exam. They present an evidence of development for a competence. And we are on our way to do this in a more gamified way on badges, stuff. So if any of you have this, we can talk. But the second part for the requirement of our student is every teacher is responsible for the well-being of their student. So we are a positive education university. We are based on positive psychology. Our ecosystem of well-being and happiness permeates through the curriculum, through the activities of the school. So whenever a teacher takes a group, we told them they will be responsible to increase, in simple terms, to increase the happiness of the group in terms of positive emotions, relation, engagement, meaning in life, mindfulness, wellness, physical wellness, etc. So we do a lot of training for those teachers so they can be able to transmit some of that part to the group. Because of the design of the course, they are able to do it. And the most interesting part for us is when the teacher learns about this, they bring this back to their companies. So they want in the company the same kind of culture, or culture of well-being and happiness, where they are requiring this. So being a teacher in TECMILENI is different than in any other university. They will receive the course designed by a central office. This course will be deployed through an LMS. This LMS will give them read access, not write access, so they can use the material. The most important part is for them to share their experience, professional experience in the classroom, making sure that the student develop the competence and become co-responsible for the well-being of the student.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to move into what technology is enabling education in LATAM. Rodrigo, I know that Passei Direto is one of it's the first iOS app.
First iOS, second Android education.
You're all in mobile there. So
Yeah.
The first Android.
Duolingo.
oh my God, yeah. Duolingo is like Duolingo, man. So anyways, I want to talk further about mobile learning because I know that this is something of your core business, and I want to know more about this, like what is the relationship between mobile learning and your platform, the students, the market, etc.
All right. So most of edtech companies are most driven in web than in mobile. Not all, but most. But in Brazil especially, like talking to some fellow entrepreneurs, we were seeing usage as low as like 10% in mobile versus web. And in the past years, I have seen this number growing. And especially because 90% of Brazil is Androids, and the quality of the Android phones, they have been evolving via time, and the users are really getting better phones, better connectivity. So we're starting to see ratios which look more like US, more developed countries, nations, but definitely mobile is a trend, and I believe that the hugest constraint was really the quality of the cell phones and the quality of connectivity, which has been improving in the last years.
And what do you think it's the trend in the Brazilian market towards education?
Towards mobile specifically?
You can talk about about tech innovation in education.
So the big groups in Brazil are starting to talk about becoming a more digital school in general. Like many of them use distance learning as really a way to get a lot of students and have great margins, but it feels like they need to become more modern, So if you see, most schools don't have a mobile solution, just to start out, So they're really seeing that they need to be closer to the students. They need to get different formats of classes. Many schools were basically filming real classes and then putting them online. And it's a completely different experience. In mobile, students are looking for quick, really objective lessons and smaller ones and see many. So they're starting to really put students first, in my opinion, and really become like, there's a huge delta between the apps the students are using like for social motives and really like the tech and the user experience for this academic stuff. So they're trying to close that gap, definitely.
Okay. Mariana, in the workforce environment, what do you see that entrepreneurs or companies are innovating through tech?
So I think in Peru, we're still like at the early stage of that curve. There's definitely not enough tech entrepreneurs yet compared to other countries in the region, and that's because all sorts of different issues that haven't supported the growth of that ecosystem as much as we would want to. But I think we're going to get there as we have more examples of people building good companies and doing well, and then we'll have a next generation coming. In terms of companies, we actually work with many large companies, many of the banks, retailers, insurance companies. They started hiring our graduates recently as they're realizing that even though they weren't born digital, if they do not start to transform and upskill their teams and build their own capacity to develop digital products in-house, they're gonna lose relevance and they could potentially die. And what we've seen working with these companies is that technology is a piece, for sure, but really more than technology, it's about culture, it's about openness, it's about building a willingness to experiment, to take risks, to think in a more lean and agile manner, to go from this year-and-a-half, 2-year-long, $2 million projects to actually start working more as a tech startup would. I think that's where I see a lot of potential, and I think many companies are actually willing to do whatever it takes because they're aware of the risk, and it's now just about how to start transforming the way they work. I think that's going to be the most crucial thing.
Great. Luis, in TECMILENI, how do you involve technology in the life cycle of your students?
Yes. We have 10,000 students, which are online-only students. And we have a number of courses we have about 25,000 sections offered every year, which are online for face-to-face students. So what we're seeing is that students at first, if they have a chance to take a face-to-face course against an online course, they will prefer a face-to-face. When they are motivated to do an online course, after they take 1 or 2 courses, they don't want to go back to face-to-face. When we asked them about what's the reason why they prefer the online, it's the obvious reason, right? Flexibility on time, flexibility on space, flexibility on the experience. We are now experiencing a new way of teaching, which is, we call them flex courses, which are offered through Zoom. And the most, the major reason they say for preferring these courses against an online-only course is the interaction. So they are able to see a teacher, they are able to talk to a teacher real time, even if they are I'm teaching one of those courses, and one of the persons which is taking it took from the company she's working on. So she's working, and at the end of the work day, she's not able to move home because she will take actually 2 hours to get home. So she opens up the session at 6 p.m. and then she will take half of the session in the work and then move on, and being able to take it from the bus, she takes home the second part of the course. So they like that flexibility, they like that option. But I think one of our major needs is to understand how to engage better the students. So they like the experience, but they say they have. We have done, I don't know if it's a study or a survey or something, when they say they have 3 to 5 sessions open in the computer when they are taking a class, right? Yeah. Probably Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, whatever they want, Netflix maybe, and I hope not, but and then the class, right? So we need to be able to engage the students through technological terms. Why cannot we be the Facebook of education? So everyone wants to be there until 3 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. So that's what the kind of stuff we're looking for.
Great. So guys, we've talked in 40 minutes about what is the education ecosystem in LATAM. We've been talking about the way the government, companies involved in this education and this nascent education ecosystem that is going on. We talked about the education learner and the teachers and the involvement with each of your companies and tech and how tech is enabling education in LATAM. So I've learned a lot about this panel as well. Like learn by doing is something that is hot in LATAM as well, like you mentioned, Luis. There's mobile learning that is a boom now, and maybe in the US and Europe it's not. It's a technology that has already existed maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but in LATAM it's now something that is being used, and we are seeing companies like Rodrigo that is using this technology to enable access to education. I just want to briefly, any type of comments or closure you want to say to the beautiful audience we are having right now.
Thank you for being here at this time.
Yeah, that's a good closure.
That's the main comment. Sure.
That's it.
Okay, great. So I don't know if we have 5.5 minutes now. If you have any questions or you want to comment on something that we've already discussed.
I can say something.
You can say something always. Mariana.
No, I think that, this type of space, I'm always amazed when I come to the US and see how much stuff is going on. There's literally hundreds and probably thousands of entrepreneurs working in all sorts of spectrum of the education sector. And I think that's amazing, and it's a big part of all the innovation that you see here. And I think it's a great example for us in Latin America, for all of us, for future entrepreneurs, for people investing in entrepreneurs, because we cannot just leave the problem to the government or the big private sector.
Yeah.
And I think Brazil is probably the one that's taking the lead. There's way more initiatives that you see out there than in other countries in the region, but yeah, I just want to say that I think it's a great example, and there should be more of us.
And to comment on that, like this is my first time in the conference as well, and I've been amazed of the way that technology is enabling education in the US and in other markets, and it's also my first time talking with entrepreneurs and well, Luis in Mexico about education and just about education. So that's great. I don't know if you, yeah. Okay.
We from the Mexico side, the government intervention in the education in Mexico has been very high. Just last year, there was a big reform in education in Mexico. We changed from goals to competence, whatever the government understand by that, but that's a step. Also, and in the part of technology, let me give you an example. We have a number of students who are online-only students, and they are not only in Mexico, they are in different parts of the world. The legislation in Mexico required, before 2 years ago, required that the student is face-to-face to the teacher in order to present a final exam. So we're changing that. We are being able to influence the government into make them understand that there's enough technology to support that the person in front of a computer is the person that is supposed to be. So authentication of the person is one way that the government is opening the door to understand better. So at least from the Mexico side, I think the government now is trying to absorb technology and trying to understand better technology. So if you are offering solutions in technology, guys, I think this is the time to do it.
In thinking about Peru, it's difficult because the list of things that are not going well is so long, beginning with the basic issue of internet connectivity. Many schools, most of the schools don't really have good internet connectivity. So you need to work around other alternatives to bring in technology into the classroom. No? And hopefully, one of the things that I worry about is that if progress is going to be linear, it's going to take a lot of time, because by the time that you get the schools connected to begin with, then you get them basic computer infrastructure, then you get your teachers trained, it's going to be a long time. So hopefully, I think what the government should probably do is, wherever the conditions are better, how to start piloting their initiatives and kind of maybe have examples where they can leapfrog and really start taking more advantage of technology in the classroom. And then maybe those good examples will push the other items that need to be taken care of forward.
Yeah, and in Brazil, there are some public universities that don't even have an LMS. So I think this illustrates how much government is really helping in technology in Brazil.
Any other question? We have 1 minute left. Okay, great. Thank you very much all for being here.